Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. What if I told you your taxes could go up even if rates stayed the same? Would you believe me? Well, that's exactly what's been happening to millions of Americans over time, thanks to a hidden shift in how tax brackets are adjusted for inflation. It's subtle, it's technical, and unless you're watching really closely, you never even notice that it's happening. The end result is that you end up paying more in taxes even when your income is just keeping up with the cost of living. Today, I want to unpack how this works and how a subtle change that happened in 2017 caused tax brackets to fall well behind inflation and caused taxpayers to pay even more in taxes, all without ever touching tax rates. Let's start by looking at the 2025 federal tax brackets. Now, let's break down how this actually plays out, because the brackets are just part of the story. What really matters is how your income is taxed. Here in the US, we use a marginal tax system, which means that your income is sort of taxed in layers, not all at once. So here's what I mean. Let's say we have a couple who's married and filing jointly. Let's say they have a household income of $100,000. First, we apply the standard deduction, which as of 2025 is $30,000, which gives them a taxable income of $70,000. Now here's the key. That $70,000 is not taxed at one flat rate. It is spread across several brackets, and only the dollars that fall into that bracket are taxed at that specific rate. So you pay 10% on the first $23,850. You pay 12% on the amount between $23,851 and $70,000. You don't hit the 22% bracket until your income crosses $96,950, which it doesn't in this case. So let's do the math. If we do 10% on the first portion of income, that's $2,385. For 12% on the next portion of income, that's $5,538. So your total tax bill would be just under $8,000. So even though your top bracket is 12%, your effective tax rate across all of your income is less than 8%. This is how our system works. Your highest dollars are taxed at the higher rate, but your lower earned dollars are always taxed at a lower rate. That brings us to the part of the tax code most people never even think about, but it's had a huge impact on your wallet: inflation adjustments. Now here's where things get interesting, and honestly, a little bit sneaky. For decades, tax brackets were adjusted each year using the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. This is really the standard inflation gauge that measures the true cost changes of food, clothing, shelter, gas, healthcare. It measures the cost of living increase over time. But in 2017, that changed. As part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Congress quietly replaced CPI with something called chained CPI. It sounds technical, and it is, but here's why it actually matters. Chained CPI grows much more slowly than regular CPI. Why? Because chained CPI assumes that when prices go up, you'll adapt. So instead of buying steak, you buy chicken. Instead of buying brand names, they assume you will adjust and buy generic. So it doesn't show the true cost of living increase because it assumes that you make behavioral changes. So truly, it says the cost of living has not increased by as much as it really has, and it makes inflation look smaller, at least on paper. And that means tax brackets go up more slowly than inflation over time. Maybe that sounds minor, but what it really means is that more of your income gets taxed at a higher rate over time. This is what's called bracket creep, and chained CPI absolutely enables it in a big way. Now let's talk about why all of this, CPI, chained CPI, and bracket creep, matter more now than ever before. We've just come through a period of the highest inflation we've seen in decades. From 2021 to 2023, the prices of practically everything, gas, groceries, rent, increased, and many employees saw their wages increase over time as they attempted to keep pace with inflation. But here's the catch. Chained CPI doesn't keep pace with true inflation. It deliberately underestimates how much the cost of living has really gone up. Let's say you're a married couple earning $90,000. In 2022, inflation rose over 7%. And let's say out of that, you ended up getting a 6% raise just to maintain your lifestyle. Your income at this point went up to $95,400, but your expenses went up too. You're not any wealthier. And now let's say the brackets only increased by, say, 2% because they're tied to chained CPI, which lags behind true inflation. Well, now a bigger portion of your income is falling into a higher tax bracket. You're not any richer, but you're paying more in taxes. That's the hidden danger of bracket creep. Your income increases maybe just enough to keep pace with inflation, but suddenly your tax bill increases, even though you haven't really gained any more purchasing power. And here's the thing that might frustrate you the most. This was not an oversight. This was an intentional move to increase tax revenue over time, all without ever touching tax rates. Back in 2017, when Congress passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they had a problem. The bill had to meet strict budget limits, so they switched to stealthy strategies like switching to chained CPI. According to the Joint Committee on Taxation, that single change was projected to raise $134 billion in tax revenue over 10 years. And it works because it allows inflation to do the heavy lifting. Brackets increase much more slowly than inflation, wages slowly increase over time, the government collects more tax revenue, all without touching your tax rates. Most people never even noticed. It doesn't show up in the headlines, it certainly doesn't show up on your paycheck, and no one said, hey, we changed how inflation works in the tax code. But it has a real impact. Let's say people just get modest raises, just enough to keep up with inflation. Well, this nudges them into paying more taxes than they otherwise should have. It's a hidden tax hike that happened in the background, and it's a reminder that how we measure inflation in the tax code matters a lot. Changes like this, quiet and technical, affect everyday families, costing them hundreds, if not thousands of dollars over time, all without them ever realizing what happened. Let's fast forward to today. As part of the new 2025 tax bill, the GOP lawmakers are proposing to switch tax brackets back to regular CPI, the inflation measure we did use prior to 2017. Their goal now? To protect taxpayers from this bracket creep, to make it so people are only paying higher taxes when their real income increases, not just because inflation nudged their income forward. It's being pitched as a way to put more money back in people's pockets, especially middle-income earners, many of whom who have seen their salaries increase in the past handful of years, but not enough to justify paying higher taxes. On the surface, it sounds like a technical correction, but in reality, it's to undo a deliberate policy that increased our taxes over the past handful of years. Switching back to CPI would let brackets adjust more quickly, reducing the chance that inflation alone would push you into a higher tax bracket. It's a small change on paper, but over time, it could save families thousands of dollars and make the system feel a bit more fair. But here's what's not making headlines. This change, along with other changes in the bill, are still resulting in nearly a $5 trillion deficit over time. And thus we've had discussions of cutting funding to programs like Medicaid and clean energy. Some of these programs are already underfunded, so it could severely strain them even more. So it certainly could spell short-term relief, but there are long-term trade-offs that we want to consider. But there's another fine print detail that we want to pay attention to. Yes, the tax brackets may switch to regular CPI, but there's still other parts of the tax code that would remain tied to chained CPI. That includes the standard deduction, the earned income tax credit, and the alternative minimum tax exemption. So even if the brackets adjust more generously, these other provisions could still lag behind inflation, quietly reducing their value over time. Chained CPI is still baked into a large portion of this system, so unless Congress decides to completely rewrite those, it's a subtle policy choice, but it's a choice that truly affects American families in the long run, and it costs them more money. So when we hear tax cuts or no new taxes, it's worth asking, how are those taxes being calculated in the first place? Because as we've just seen, one tiny shift in the formula going from traditional CPI to chained CPI can quietly raise taxes without ever touching the rates. So it's a simple reminder to read the fine print, ask deeper questions, and not take every promise at face value. What are your thoughts on these changes that subtly happen in the background that often don't get a lot of attention? I find them fascinating. Leave your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. More in taxes, That's upsetting. What are the odds you could hear that saw? They're demoing a building next to me, and I decided to film today. Well, in defense of me, they decided to demo on my filming day. The world should pay attention to my schedule, right? I don't think that's how it works. The saw has to take a break at some point. Okay, here's my moment. Okay, this is slowly but surely dying because of the noise. So fucking annoying. On that side of my house, they have like music blaring. So you can't hear that over here, so I can't work over there. But the saw needs to stop.